13.7 Applications of Quadratic Equations. The purpose of learning how to solve a quadratic equation is so that we can solve real-life problems. In order to solve any application problem, there's 4 steps that we need to follow. The first one is to read the problem and figure out what you're being asked to find. Figure out what your unknown is, and then write a let statement to represent the unknown. A let statement is where we determine what our variable is going to be, and we state what it is and what it represents. Then you need to reread the problem and translate it into a quadratic equation. Then we can solve the quadratic equation, usually by following the rules of factoring, and then reread the problem to make sure that you answer the question. So let's look at our first example. The square of a number minus twice the number is 63. Find the number. So the first step is to write our let statement. We need to figure out what it is that we're being asked to find. Well, this one's easy because it says it at the very end of the statement. Find the number. So we're looking for the number. So we just need to determine what variable we want to use for the number. So I'm going to say let x equal the number. Of course, you can use whatever variable you want. You can use n, you could use p, you could use whatever. All right, so I'm going to say let x equal the number. And now we need to write the equation. All right, the square of a number. Well, if my number is x, the square of the number would be x squared. Minus twice the number. All right, so minus twice the number. So minus 2x is, that would be equals 63. So now I've written my quadratic equation. Now I need to solve the quadratic equation, and I'm going to do so by factoring. So I'm going to subtract. Remember, in factoring, the first step is to get everything on one side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 63 from both sides of the equation. And now I have x squared minus 2x minus 63 equals 0. All right, so this is a trinomial. We know that trinomials factor into 2 binomials. All right, so in the first 2 spots would be x and x. This tells me my signs are going to be different. The factors of 63 that would subtract to give me 2 would be 7 and 9. Well, this tells me the sign of the bigger number. All right, so the 9 would go here and the 7 would go here. Remember, the way that we can always check our factoring to see if it works is to do our smiley face. This is a positive 7x, and this is a negative 9x, which would give me a negative 2x, and that's what I needed it to be, a negative 2x. So I know that I factored correctly. So once I've factored my quadratic equation, then I want to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. All right, so x minus 7, or x plus 7 equals 0. X minus 9 equals 0. Well, if I subtract 7 from both sides, I get x equals negative 7. And if I add 9 to both sides, I get x equals 9. Okay, so both of these would be my solutions to my problem. If I were to plug either one of these in, they would be correct. So just to double check, let's plug them in and see if I plugged in negative 7 into my original equation here. If I plug in negative 7 squared minus 2 times negative 7 equals 63. All right, negative 7 squared is positive 49. Negative 2 times negative 7 would be a positive 14. And if I add those together, I get 63. All right, so that checks. And then if I were to plug in 9 squared minus 2 times 9 equals 63. 9 squared is 81, and 81 minus 18 is 63. So I have two solutions to this problem. Okay, let's look at the next one. The length of a rectangular garden is 5 feet more than its width. The area of the garden is 176 square feet. Find the dimensions of the rectangular garden. Anytime we're dealing with a problem and it says than its whatever, that's what we're going to write our equation for. So this is than its width. So we're going to write our equation in terms of width. So for my let statement, change colors again, I'm going to say let W equal the width. Now, we cannot solve an equation that has more than one variable in it. So we can't use W for width and L for length. We need to write our length in terms of the width. Well, this says that the length is 5 feet more than the width. So my length is 5 feet more than the width. So if my width is W, W plus 5 would be the same as my length. So now I have both variables both unknowns in terms of W. And it says to find it tells me that the area of the garden is 176 square feet. So we know that we can find the area of a rectangle by multiplying the length times the width. Well, if this is my width and this is my length, to write this equation, my area, which is 176 square feet, my area is equal to my length times my width. I'm going to do it the other way around, width times length. So W times W plus 5. And that is how we can write this to find the area in terms of just one variable. Now that we've written our equation, let's solve it. So the first thing I want to do is distribute my W. And I get W squared plus 5W. Okay, so next I'm going to subtract 176 from both sides. And I get 0 equals W squared plus 5W minus 176. All right, so again we have a trinomial that can be factored into two binomials. In my first two spots, I'm going to put W. Since this is a minus, we know that that means that my signs are different. And the factors of 176 that would subtract to give me 5 would be 11 and 16. This tells me the sign of the bigger number, so 16 goes here and 11 goes here. All right, so then when I set each factor equal to 0, let's see, let me do it up here. Okay, so I have W plus 16 equals 0. If I subtract 16 from both sides, I get W equals negative 16. And then if I do W minus 11 equals 0, if I add 11 to both sides, I get W equals 11. Now, in the previous problem, it just said a number. Well, here we're talking about a dimension. This is the width. Well, our width can't be negative, so that is not a valid answer. So the only answer that we can use is 11. So this means that our width is 11 feet. Okay, so our width is 11 feet. And they didn't just want the width, it said find the dimensions, so we need the length. Well, for the length, if I plug 11 in right here, 11 plus 5 is 16. So those are the dimensions of my rectangular garden. Number 3 says find two consecutive even integers whose product is 48. All right, so first of all, let's talk about what these words mean. Consecutive means one right after the other, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But even, consecutive even, would be 2, 4, 6, 8. So it's one right after the other, but they're even integers or numbers. And so we need two of those. Well, we can start with the first one. I don't know what the first one is, so I'm just going to say let x equal the first even integer. Now, I don't know what my first integer is. Say, let's pretend like it's 10. Well, what would the next even integer be? It would be 12, right? Okay, so if this is x, what would I need to add to x, or what do I need to add to 10 to get to 12? I would need to add 2, right? 10 plus 2 is 12. So whatever this is, if I add 2 to it, it's going to get me to the next even integer. So x plus 2 is going to be the second even integer. All right, so I only needed 2. If I needed another one, it would be x plus 4. But this says find two consecutive even integers whose product is 48. So what does product mean? It means to multiply. So I'm going to take these two numbers, x and x plus 2, and multiply them. And it is 48, or equals 48. So this is my equation. And now I'm going to solve the equation. I'm going to distribute the x, and I get x squared plus 2x equals 48. So now I need to solve this. I'm going to subtract 48 from both sides. And I get x squared plus 2x minus 48 equals 0. All right, again, we have a trinomial. It factors into two binomials. My first spot, I'd have x and x. The factors of 48 that will subtract to give me 2 are 6 and 8. All right, this tells me the sign of the bigger number. And now I take each factor and set it equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so if I add 6 to both sides, I get x equals 6. If I subtract 8 from both sides, I get x equals negative 8. Now, this said find two consecutive even integers whose product is 48. If I took 6 and I plugged it in, so that's what we need to do always, is plug it back into our let statements. So my first number is 6. If I add 2 to 6, I would get 8. Okay, so that would be a solution. All right, that's two consecutive even integers whose product is 48. If I multiply those together, I get 48. Now, if I take the negative 8, if that's my first integer, if I add 2 to a negative 8, I would get a negative 6. All right, negative 6 and negative 8, if I multiply those together, I would get a positive 48. So I have two solutions to this equation. All right, let's look at this last one. One of the top tourist attractions in Acapulco, Mexico is watching the cliff divers off the La Cabrera cliff. The divers' platform is 144 feet above the sea. The height, h, in feet of the cliff diver above the ocean after t seconds is given by the quadratic equation h is equal to negative 16t squared plus 144. How long will it take for the diver to reach the ocean? So they have given us the equation, so we don't have to come up with the equation. And they've also told us what our variables represent. The height is h, t is the number of seconds. But in this equation, that we've been given, there are two variables. And like I said, we can't solve an equation that has two variables. So let's figure out what we can replace in here. First of all, let's sketch this out to see what they're talking about. Okay, so we have this cliff, and the cliff divers dive into the ocean. All right, so they dive down here. Well, this is 144 feet high. The question is, how long will it take for the diver to reach the ocean? So here the height is 144. When they reach the ocean, what would the height be? 0. So they want to know how long it'll take for the diver to reach the ocean. So in this equation, when we reach the ocean, our h would be 0. So we can replace the h with 0, and then we only have one variable. So we can solve this equation. Okay, so if we're going to solve this by factoring, if you look at this, if you'll remember, a form of factoring is to factor, if we have a binomial, if we have perfect squares, we can factor by using a difference of perfect squares. Well, there's a plus sign in between it, but if we rearrange this, then we have the difference of perfect squares. All right, so let's factor this by using a difference of perfect squares. The square root of 144 is 12, and we could factor out the greatest common factor first. Either way is going to work. All right, and if I take the square root, well, let me do that twice. If I take the square root of 16, the square root of 16, the square root of 16t squared would be 4t. And I have plus and minus. Okay, so if I take each one of these and set them equal to 0 and solve, all right, if I subtract 4t from both sides, I get 12 is equal to a negative 4t, and then divide by negative 4, and that would give me a negative 3. Okay, then for the other one, if I would add 4t to both sides, and I have 12 is equal to 4t, divide by 4, and I get 3 is equal to t. Now, what does t represent? T is the time in seconds. Can we have a negative 3 seconds? No, we can't. So this is no good. This would be our only valid solution. So it would take 3 seconds to get from the top of the cliff down to the ocean.